folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. Good evening, folks, and welcome back to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Erschen, and this is a very special episode that I'm kind of excited about, and I've been looking forward to all week. And I've been sitting writing my list down and everything, trying to determine which are the best. And I think I came up with the ultimate list of the top 10 horror films of all time. I tried to mix it up with a couple old time classics with some slashers, some zombies, and just some visceral, psychological horror films. And I think I came up with a real solid list, and I'm excited to bring it all to you, the fans. And first I'm going to start off with someone that just barely missed the cut. And that's ones that I really had a hard time not including on the list, but the sheer weight of my top 10 list is outweighed. And that is Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven, and starring the legendary Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, the man of our dreams. Next honorable mention is H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator, starring the great Jeffrey Combs in what I feel is the greatest horror performance in history, as the Dr. Herbert West. Next we have the original, the immortal Friday the 13th. This is one that started it all, folks. The legend of Jason Voorhees begins here. Now those are my honorable mentions. Now let's get to the cream of the crop. The top 10 horror films of all time, folks. And what a great one we have here to start the list off. Number 10, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper. An absolute ride into hell, with the legendary horror icon Leatherface take a wild and disturbing journey through the land of the depths of hell. Number 9. Here we have to I decided to represent the werewolf genre. And my favorite werewolf film of all times is, that's right, The Howling. Not American Werewolf in London, not The Wolfman, not Wolfen or A Company of Wolves. It's The Howling, baby. The greatest werewolf film of all time, in my opinion. It mixes great self-referential humor and lethal scares, incredible makeup effects, and just great performances by Dee Wallace and everyone involved. The Howling. Now, number 8. One of the old-time classics. I had to include the vampire genre. And what better way to represent that vampire genre than the horror of Dracula, the best Dracula movie ever made, starring Christopher Lee, the legendary horror master, in his finest performance of all time. Excellent, excellent film, also starring the great Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. Amazing performances, excellent visuals, and that great old-time gothic feel with a great Dracula's castle and wonderful visual cinematography. Now, number 7, I also had to represent what I feel is a very vitally important part of the horror genre, and that is the zombie horror cinema. And what better choice than the mother of all zombie films, Dawn of the Dead. George A. Romero's masterpiece of zombie horror cinema. The great epic, the ultimate zombie film for all times, when there is no more room in hell. the dead shall walk the earth. Dawn of the Dead, folks. Now, get ready for number 6. The great Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, starring the legendary Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates and Janet Leigh as Marion Crane. An epic, amazing horror film that brought horror films into the modern age. From gothic castles and vampires and werewolves down to a very real madman known as Norman Bates. Now we represent the kind of the ghost story, or shall we say a visual masterpiece, and that is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. You want to talk about visual scares and epic storytelling with the camera, then The Shining is your best bet. Also with iconic performance by Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. Amazing cast, but the real star of the film is the video camera and the amazing epic storytelling with the camera work. And just sheer scenes that send chills right up your spine. It's a very scary, very visceral, and very surreal film. Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece on his take on the classic Stephen King story, The Shining. Now here we go with the ultimate in psychological horror, I feel. The greatest example of that, and that is Rosemary's Baby. In at number 4, directed by Roman Polanski and starring Mia Farrow, with an Oscar win by Ruth Gordon, and excellent performances by Sidney Blackmore. Run and grab this film if you haven't already. It's the ultimate in slow burn suspense and fear and terror. There's not so much gory visual effects or crazy over the top scares. It's just psychological burn, slow burn into madness, and an ultimate climax that is absolutely unforgettable. Rosemary's Baby, folks. Now, some may find this choice a little controversial, but I've seen it on quite a few countdowns. But you just simply cannot deny the power and the terror of this next film. In at number 3, it's Alien, Ridley Scott's masterpiece. In space, no one can hear you scream. This is the one that started off, folks. Sigourney Weaver as Whitley, Tom Skerritt, Veronica Cartwright. Excellent performances by Yaphet Kotto and Harry Dean Stanton. Just an amazing cast. And incredible set design pieces by H.R. Geiger, the wonderful artist. And it's just insanely scary. Even though it's a science fiction film, it is so scary you have to include it on the top 10 horror list, because this movie is so scary, it's so thrilling, and it's so incredibly directed, and it's a movie that just holds up. It was made in 1979, but it holds up to this day, is terrifying, and it's just an absolute masterpiece. Alien by Ridley Scott. Now we're getting to the nitty-gritty, the top 2 horror films of all time. And you may have guessed 1 or 2 of them, but I bet you haven't guessed both of them. And I bet you haven't guessed what the top one is. Because this is my countdown, people. I'm throwing my 2 cents in the ringer. And I love watching other people's countdowns and seeing their opinions on what they feel is the top 10, and I really enjoy that. So here I am throwing my 2 cents in the top 2 horror films of all time. Number 2, The Exorcist, directed by William Peter Blatty, starring the great Ellen Burstyn, and an amazing debut by Linda Blair, the horror icon, in the ultimate performance, one of the greatest performances in horror history, and probably the first film to represent demonic possession in film. And no film ever represents that better than this one, The Exorcist. An amazing classic that's so terrifying and so scary to this day, and amazing makeup effects on Linda Blair, who plays Regan, the young child who is possessed by a demon, and a brilliant performance by Max von Sydow as the Exorcist, and also his fellow priest Damien Karras, and excellent performance as well, Jason Miller. So now we will get to what I feel is the greatest horror film of all time, and a lot of you people might find this controversial and you might not agree with it, but one thing you cannot disagree with, and that's the fact that this is an immortal classic beloved by all horror fans, and that is John Carpenter's Halloween. That's right, in my world, John Carpenter's Halloween is the greatest horror film of all time. Just incredible, iconic visuals, just epic video storytelling with the camera, amazing cinematography, excellent performances that are just iconic, filled with chock full of great lines and dialogue, and it's just incredibly scary. And we also are introduced to the Boogeyman, the horror icon known as Michael Myers, the first representation of unstoppable evil force in horror cinema, and I feel the greatest slasher film of all time, as well as being the greatest horror film of all time. And this is the one that started the slasher boom of the 1980s. This is the one that ushered in a very important era in horror cinema, in my opinion. And that's the slasher boom. So with films such as Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and The Prowler, and Prom Night, and films of that nature. And so the absolute best example of the slasher film is Halloween, no question about it. And what cannot be denied is the great performance of Jamie Lee Curtis as the ultimate final girl in horror film history. Jamie Lee Curtis, that's right, as Laurie Strode, the young babysitter stalked by the Boogeyman, Michael Myers, the unstoppable mad killer. That's right, Halloween, folks, the greatest of all time, in my opinion. And you saw my top 10 list, and you saw my honorable mentions. I'm sure you cannot deny that all these horror films are just classic examples of the genre, and immortal classics that will be remembered throughout history and forever. And so what's your favorite top 10 horror films of all times? Give me a comment and let me know. Tell me what your favorites are. And any comments you might have on my list. If you enjoyed it, if you didn't enjoy it, what films you felt should have been included on this, or what films you would not include on this. So thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared. Thank you, folks. Folks, don't forget to grab your Sean Patrick Erschen gear and represent the Horror Corner. Also, check out these awesome mugs we have, perfect for your coffee. And definitely check out the Horror Hangout live stream t-shirt and represent the legacy of the Horror Hangout. Check out the link in the description below this video.